Have you ever had someone in your life that affected your life so dramatically that it put you on a totally different course in your life? I did. I'm Judah. I'm the son of Jacob, or Israel, you might know him. The grandson of Isaac, the great-grandson of Abraham. And although I'm going to tell you my story, it's really not about me. But it's about the person in God's grace and mercy who sent this person into my life and put me on a totally different path. I was the fourth son of my father. My mom's name was Leah. And I'm going to tell you a bit about Dad's story too. Dad fell in love with a woman, loved her deeply, and wanted to marry her. And on the wedding day, her father, my grandfather, gladly, he tricked my dad because the woman that my dad loved wasn't my mother. It was my Aunt Rachel. And so on the wedding day, when the bride was brought in, heavily veiled, and then they went off to consummate the marriage in the dark, my dad switched my Aunt Rachel for my mom, Leah. And so in the morning, my dad discovered the wrong woman, but it was too late. He was already married to her. So a week later, he married my Aunt Rachel. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole family dynamics because it's really complicated, but my dad had two wives, and they ended up with two concubines because of sibling rivalry, we'll just say that. Dad also had children by Mom's handmaid and also by Aunt Rachel's handmaid. So there were a total of 12 of us, brothers and a sister. And who do you think was Dad's favorite of the four women?
Rachel.
It was my Aunt Rachel, because she was the one that Dad loved. And so children started coming along, but my Aunt Rachel wasn't having it. So it was many years later before Aunt Rachel finally started having children. And her firstborn son, Joseph, well, he ended up being Dad's favorite. He was the firstborn son of his favorite wife. So he, of course, became the favorite son. We all knew it. I mean, Dad doted upon that boy, and I gotta tell you, we got a hating on for him. Hated him. And so one day Dad gave Joseph this really, really nice coat. Really nice. Do you know what he gave the rest of us? Nothing. Yeah, we hated that kid. In truth, we were jealous because, at least I can only speak for myself, he robbed me, I felt, of my father. I didn't get the attention and the affection that Joseph did. None of us did, really. And it didn't help when he started spouting off all of his dreams about how one day we're going to bow down and worship him. Snotty nose little runt. Who did he think he was? And yet people seem to know me as being an honorable man. Does that sound honorable to you? Oh, it gets worse. One day, my brothers and I, minus the favorite boy and his younger brother, Benjamin, we were off in sheep at the pasture. So we were far away from home, and Dad sends Joseph out to check up on us. We saw him coming from afar. And it was like all of the years of jealousy and bitterness and hate kind of welled up in us. And so we planned on murdering him. But Reuben, the oldest, he didn't want to do that. So we tossed him in a well. And then I came up with this brilliant plan. Well, if we kill him, what good is that? We get rid of him. Sure. But if we sell him, A, he'll suffer, and I wanted him to suffer. And B, we'll get some money. Win-win. And so that's what we did. I never gave any thought to the years of misery that we would be condemning Joseph to. Never gave a thought to how Dad would feel, or Aunt Rachel, or Benjamin. Does that sound like an honorable man to you? This is who I was. Well, years later, after we sold Joseph and went home and told Dad that he'd been killed, I got married. I had 3 boys. It's awesome. And when my oldest son, Er, was old enough, I got him a wife, Tamar. Er died without any children. Now, as our custom was at that time, it was the duty of the next oldest brother to marry the wife, to have a child with her, and that child, that firstborn son, would not be considered the son of the person who fathered it, but the son of the man who died. I don't know if you get that, it's a little complicated. We don't do that anymore, by the way, but made for some interesting family dynamics. Anyway, so my second son, Onan, married Tamar. But Onan knew that that child that he would father would not be his. And there's all kinds of mess that goes along with that. Anyway, he died. Now I had 3 sons. 2 of them married this woman, Tamar. They're both dead. I have 1 son left. So, as is custom, when my son Shelah grows up, I'm to give Tamar to Shelah to father a child. Well, he was too young, thankfully. And so I sent Tamar off to live with her father and told her, when Shelah grows up, when he becomes of age, well then, I'll give you to Shelah as a wife. I had no intention of doing that. I lost 2 kids already because of her. I wasn't about to lose another. And so I pushed her off to her father. Now, a few years later, my wife died. And after mourning for her, it was time to go up and shear sheep. And so I went to Timnah with a good buddy of mine, and we went sheep shearing. Well, as we were along the road one day, I was walking along, and I saw this woman on the side of the road, a prostitute. It had been a while. And so I bargained with her to go in. Of course, I didn't have any cash on me at the time. I was there for sheep shearing. It wasn't planned, do you understand? And so I promised her a goat. Very reasonable price, and she agreed. But she wanted something as a pledge, like a collateral, to make sure that I would come back with it. Well, I didn't really have anything on me, except for my staff, which was very ornate, by the way, very unique, and my signet in court. And so I gave those to her as collateral, and then went in and enjoyed the fruits of my purchase. Later, when I got home, I sent the goat back to her with my friend, but she was nowhere to be found, this prostitute. And when we asked around, the men said there had never been a prostitute there. Well, I'm pretty sure I wasn't dreaming. But while I wasn't about to say anything either, I'd already shamed myself by going into a prostitute. I certainly wasn't going to broadcast it, now was I? And I certainly didn't want people knowing that I was stupid enough to give this woman my signet. You understand? My signet? My seal? She could use that and it would be binding in any contract. I don't know what I was thinking. Anyway, time passed. I'd like to say I forgot about it, but I didn't. The shame of it, I couldn't shake off. The stupidity of it, I couldn't shake off. And then about 3 months later, I get news that Tamar, my daughter-in-law, who was supposed to be being a widow at her father's house, is pregnant. Well, how do you think that happened? She committed adultery. And by our laws, I can have her condemned. Well, you betcha I was going to condemn her. I mean, by committing adultery, she shamed not only her father's house, but she shamed our house. Like I didn't carry enough guilt and shame already. And so I demanded that she be put to death for her sin. And so while they were bringing her out to me, a messenger came with a message from Tamar. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I care what she has to say. Like, what difference is it going to make? What could she possibly say to me that would change my mind? Well, it turns out it did care. It turns out that it made all the difference in the world. She said, by this signet and staff, by I'm pregnant by this man whose signet and staff this is. And I looked, and of course, whose do you think it was? Mine. Awkward. That was the turning point in my life. You know, people know the name Judah, but very few people know the name Tamar, and really it should be the other way around. Tamar had more honor, more integrity than I ever would. Stop and think about it now, because this is what I did. It was like God showing me, for the first time in my life, scales being removed from my eyes, what kind of man I had been and what Tamar had gone through. You see, when I look back and I saw like Er and Onan had died because they were married to this woman, that's all I would allow myself to acknowledge. But the fact is that Er was an evil man. Evil. Now, I'm no saint, but I can imagine what Tamar suffered at the hands of my son. And that's why he died. It wasn't because of Tamar, it was because of his evil, and God struck him dead. Onan refused to do the duty to his brother's wife because he refused to get her pregnant. And so God struck him dead. Tamar had been abused by my first son, rejected by my second son, and of course, living with the shame that she is childless. I ship her off to her father's house, effectively rejecting her and dooming her because I wouldn't give my son Shayla to her, dooming her to a life that she would probably end up at on the street, prostituting herself or dying. Poverty, shame, because I rejected her. Rejected by my son Shayla because he wasn't eager to marry her either. I mean, come on, let's face it. Would you want to marry your brother's leftovers? Would you? Shayla was young. Tamar was old. Would you want that? I am ashamed to say that not only did we think of Tamar as something that to be scraped off the bottom of our sandals, but we treated her that way as well. The guilt, or not the guilt, but the shame and the rejection, the physical suffering, the emotional suffering that she would have gone through, and to be ostracized by the community that she was living in. She was back in her father's house, waiting for a groom that was never going to come. And she knew it. And so this woman who honors God and honors my family, even when I don't, dresses up as a prostitute. Now, I'm not saying that tricking me was a great thing to do, and we're not even going to get into that. But she made sure that our line continued. She honored my family by making sure that she had an heir. Do you get that? Can you imagine sleeping with your father-in-law to ensure the family line? I doubt she even liked me. God, in His mercy and grace, also showed me not only how I treated Tamar, but then it made me think of all the guilt and the shame that I've been carrying for so long because of what I've done to my brother Joseph, and to my father, and to my aunt, and to my youngest brother. And so I vowed that day to be a new man, a man for God. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, was now the God of Judah. And I prayed that I would be a different man. Now, how many people here have said, I vow I'm going to do this? How many have said that? I'm going to do this. How many people here have said that at least once, and it hasn't happened? You never really know until it's put to the test, right? And so, a little while later, a few years later, a famine struck the land. And I'm not going to get into all the details of what happened, but let me just say that it came to a point where all of my brothers and I, including Benjamin, had to go to Egypt to get food. And it ended up that Benjamin was suspected, or I guess it was proven, that he had stolen, and they were going to keep him as a slave. Now, a few years ago, I would have gotten out of Dodge fast. I would have been so gone out of there before he changed the governor changed his mind and decided to keep all of us. Leave Benjamin, let him suffer that life. But see, I was a changed man. There was no way that I could live with Benjamin being taken. Even though he was caught red-handed, although incidentally, as a sidebar, he didn't actually do it. This turned out to be something else, but that's a story for another time. And so I pleaded with the governor, please take me instead. I wanted, earnestly wanted, to take the place of my brother Benjamin. It didn't matter how bad a life I might have had as a slave. I wanted to take his place. I did not want him to suffer the life that we had condemned his brother to. I didn't want to see my father brokenhearted even to the point of death like he was with Joseph. I didn't want to see the look on Aunt Rachel's face. I couldn't. I was guilty. And I realized I was that man now. I was that man of God. And do you know why I became that man? Because of Tamar. She lived a life of integrity. She did the right thing, regardless of all of the abuse and all of the shame, no matter how bad her life got. She always did the right thing. And I wanted to be like her. Now, you're not going to hear men of my time say that too much, that we want to be like a woman. And I truly believe that God placed Tamar in my life to set me on a new course. The course I was on, the path I was on, I was going to Sheol. It's hell for you people who don't know Hebrew. But when God placed Tamar in my life, He set me on the path to eternity. Now, I don't know what you're going to get out of what I've told you this morning. But there are two things that I would like you to take away from this. One, no matter how bad you feel like your life is going, no matter how many struggles that you have, even if it seems like everything is constantly going wrong, you're constantly being knocked down, you're constantly being put down, don't tire from doing good. Let me tell you, God blessed Tamar significantly because of what she had done. I told you she was pregnant. She didn't have a daughter. She had a son, but she didn't even have one son. God blessed her with two sons. Shame and disgrace left her. And her name is known throughout history. And here's something else that I don't like to brag, but I mean, who doesn't like to brag about their kids? Who doesn't like to brag? Anybody here like to brag about their kids a little bit? Well, my sons, Perez and Zara, well, Zara had his own thing, but Perez was in the line that great kings came from. King David, you've heard of him, right? He's like a great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson. And ultimately, Tamar is a matriarch of the Messiah. Not every blessing that you receive, you're going to know about. Tamar and I passed away long, obviously, before King David and Jesus. But we are still blessed and honored because of what Tamar has done. So that's the first thing I want you to take away. Don't cease from doing good, no matter how hard things get. And the other thing I want you to take away is this. My story isn't me. God has placed a Tamar in each one, at least one Tamar, in each one of our lives. When we are going down the wrong path, it may not be as bad a path as I was going down. God places people in our lives to help change us and put us on the course that we are supposed to be on. Who's your Tamar? Do you know? Or who is your Tamar going to be? I'm going to leave you with those thoughts.